Standing in my parents' mansion with my cancer diagnosis, my mother said, "Your sister Madison's wedding is in 3 months. We've already committed to paying for everything." I stared at the $400,000 budget that meant more than my life. The medical reports in my trembling hands showed stage 2 breast cancer, and I was only 26 years old. The oncologist had been clear about the urgency. We needed to start treatment immediately, but the total cost would reach $300,000, with insurance covering barely a third. I'd managed to save $100,000 through years of careful planning, but I needed help with the remaining $200,000. My father stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking their manicured gardens, his back rigid with what I initially mistook for concern. My mother sat perfectly still on their imported Italian leather sofa, her expression unreadable as she absorbed my words. The silence that followed felt heavier than the diagnosis itself. "We can't help you right now, Olivia," my mother finally spoke, her voice carrying that practiced calm she'd perfected over years of charity galas. "The venue alone cost $150,000. The flowers are being flown in from Holland. Madison deserves her dream wedding." Deserves. That single word hit harder than any chemotherapy ever would. I watched my father turn from the window, his face flushed not with worry for his daughter's life, but with irritation at the inconvenience of my timing. "Do you have any idea what we've already committed? The deposits are non-refundable. Madison's been planning this for years." My mind, even in its shocked state, began calculating. I knew their financial position better than they realized. My small consulting firm specialized in the corporate restructuring, and I'd learned to read balance sheets the way others read novels. Blackstone Industries, my father's company, had posted profits of $8 million last year. They'd just purchased this mansion for $3.2 million cash. My mother's jewelry collection alone was insured for $1.8 million. The money existed, I just didn't matter enough to access it. Madison chose that moment to burst through the front door, her arms laden with shopping bags from Bergdorf Goodman and Saks. Her face glowed with the particular happiness of someone who'd never faced real hardship. "Mom, I found the perfect Jimmy Choo heels to go with my reception dress. Only $3,000. She froze when she saw my tear-stained face, her enthusiasm dimming to annoyance. "Oh, are you still talking about the cancer thing?" "The cancer thing?" As if I'd announced a minor scheduling conflict rather than a potential death sentence. I turned to my sister, searching for even a shred of empathy in her perfectly made-up face. "Madison, could we maybe scale back the wedding just enough to—" "Absolutely not," she cut me off, dropping her bags with practiced indignation. "Jason's family owns half of Connecticut. They're expecting something spectacular. I can't embarrass them with some budget ceremony just because you couldn't get better insurance." I looked between the three of them, my family by blood but strangers by choice. My strategic mind, the one that had built my consulting firm from nothing, was already shifting into survival mode. They didn't know about Sterling Capital Partners' recent acquisition offer for my company. They didn't know about my client list that included 3 Fortune 500 subsidiaries. They certainly didn't know that Jason Whitmore, Madison's fiancé, had hired me 6 months ago to quietly investigate some irregularities in his family's foundation. Irregularities that trace back to Madison's spending habits. "I see exactly where I stand in this family," I said quietly, gathering my medical papers with steady hands. My mother reached for my arm with her manicured fingers, but I pulled away. "After the wedding might be too late for me, but I understand your priorities now." That night, I sat in my downtown apartment, modest by my family's standards, but purchased with my own money, surrounded by medical bills and Sterling Capital's acquisition documents. They had offered $2.5 million for my firm and a senior consultant position with a base salary of $400,000 annually. I'd been hesitating, loving the independence of running my own company. But cancer has a way of clarifying priorities. My phone buzzed with a text from Madison. "Don't you dare tell Jason's family about your situation. I don't want anything overshadowing my special day." I screenshot the message, adding it to a folder I'd been maintaining for years, a digital record of every slight, every dismissal, every moment they'd chosen appearances over family. With steady fingers, I pulled up Sterling Capital's offer letter. Marcus Sterling himself had called 3 times in the past month, eager to acquire my client relationships and expertise. What my family didn't understand was that my little consulting business had become the go-to firm for mid-sized companies facing bankruptcy. I'd developed proprietary restructuring models that had saved 17 companies in the last 2 years, generating over $200 million in recovered value. I drafted my acceptance email to Marcus Sterling, then scheduled my first chemotherapy treatment for the following week. But before hitting send, I opened another document, my analysis of Blackstone Industries. I'd been tracking my father's company for years, watching him make increasingly risky decisions while Madison burned through the marketing budget on vanity projects. According to my projections, they had 18 months before facing serious financial distress, 24 months at the outside. The next morning, I signed the acquisition papers at Sterling Capital's offices. Marcus Sterling himself attended, along with the senior partners. "We're not just buying your company, Olivia," Marcus said, his sharp eyes studying my face. "We're investing in your mind. That restructuring model you developed, we want to implement it across our entire portfolio. I'll need flexibility for medical appointments," I said directly. "I'm starting cancer treatment next week." Marcus didn't flinch. "Whatever you need. We've added comprehensive health coverage to your package. Full coverage, no caps, no questions asked. We value our assets, and you're our most valuable acquisition this year." The irony wasn't lost on me. Strangers valued my life at full coverage while my family wouldn't sacrifice a single wedding ice sculpture. The months that followed tested every ounce of strength I possessed. Chemotherapy ravaged my body. My hair fell out in clumps, my skin turned gray, and there were days I could barely stand. But I worked through it all, restructuring companies from my hospital bed, conducting video calls between treatments, building my reputation at Sterling Capital with the kind of determination that comes from having everything to prove and nothing to lose. My family never asked how I was affording treatment. They were too busy with wedding preparations, the dress fittings, the cake tastings, the endless social media posts about Madison's fairy tale journey. I watched it all from a distance, their posts appearing in my feed, while I sat in the chemotherapy ward, my laptop balanced on the hospital tray as I analyzed another failing company. What they didn't see was my meteoric rise at Sterling Capital. My restructuring strategies saved 3 major clients in my first 6 months, generating $50 million in recovered value. Marcus Sterling began including me in senior partner meetings. I was given first look at all major restructuring opportunities. My base salary was increased to $500,000, with bonuses that doubled that amount. Madison's wedding was everything she'd dreamed of. I attended wearing a designer wig and carefully applied makeup that couldn't quite hide what chemotherapy had done to me. I sat in the back row, assigned to the table with distant cousins and plus ones nobody knew. The flowers from Holland were indeed spectacular. $30,000 worth of rare orchids that would be dead within a week. The 7-tier cake cost more than a car. Madison floated through it all in her $45,000 designer gown, never once glancing at the back table where her sister sat. During the father-daughter dance, I overheard Jason's mother whispering to another guest, "Did you see that pale woman in the back? She looks terribly ill. You'd think they'd ask such people to stay home rather than bring down the atmosphere." I smiled, knowing what they didn't. That Jason had hired me to investigate why $300,000 had disappeared from his family's charitable foundation. The trail led directly to Madison's personal accounts, funding shopping sprees she'd hidden from him. I'd presented Jason with the evidence 2 weeks before the wedding, but he'd chosen to proceed anyway. The embarrassment of canceling would be worse than a divorce later, he'd said. I'd kept copies of everything, of course. 3 years passed. My cancer went into remission, though the battle had left its scars. My hair grew back darker and thicker than before. My body, once weakened, became strong through disciplined training. I threw myself into work with the focus of someone who'd faced death and won. At Sterling Capital, I became known as the surgeon, the consultant called in to save companies everyone else had written off. Then, on an otherwise ordinary Tuesday, a familiar company name crossed my desk. Blackstone Industries. I leaned back in my executive chair, studying the preliminary report. The numbers were even worse than I'd projected 3 years ago. Debt of $75 million against assets of $50 million. 3 pending lawsuits from creditors. Stock down 60% in the last quarter. My father had gambled on an expansion that failed spectacularly, while Madison's marketing department had hemorrhaged money on campaigns that generated no return. Marcus Sterling himself delivered the file. "This is perfect for you, Olivia. They need a miracle, and you're our miracle worker. Full authority on this one. Every decision goes through you." "Marcus," I said carefully, "I should disclose that Blackstone Industries is my father's company." He smiled, that shark-like grin that had built his empire. "I know. That's why I'm giving it to you. Sometimes the universe delivers justice in interesting packages. Make the right business decision, whatever that might be." My phone rang within an hour, my father's number. I let it ring, focusing instead on the detailed financial analysis. The company could be saved, but it would require brutal restructuring. Both my father and Madison would need to be removed from leadership. Their salaries alone, $2 million and $800,000 respectively, were bleeding the company dry while they produced no actual value. By the 5th call, I answered. "Blackstone Industries needs help." My father's voice cracked with desperation. "Sterling Capital is our last option. We need—" "I know what you need," I interrupted calmly. "I'm looking at your file right now. I'm Sterling Capital's lead consultant for corporate restructuring. I'll be handling your case." The silence stretched between us, filled with the weight of a cosmic irony. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. "Olivia, tomorrow, 9 a.m., Sterling Capital's main conference room. Bring Mom and Madison. As CFO, she needs to be present for all major decisions." I hung up before he could respond. That night, I prepared meticulously. I chose my weapons carefully, a perfectly tailored Tom Ford suit that cost more than Madison's wedding shoes, Louboutin heels that announced my arrival with every step, and the Patek Philippe watch I'd bought myself after my first $1 million bonus. But the real weapon was the presentation I'd prepared. 60 slides of brutal financial truth that would strip away every illusion they had built. They arrived the next morning like actors in a tragedy they didn't yet understand they were starring in. My father wore his best suit, the one he reserved for board meetings. My mother draped herself in Chanel, her armor of choice. Madison strutted in, carrying what she clearly believed was a Hermes Birkin bag, though the stitching immediately betrayed it as a high-quality fake, something I'd learned to spot during long chemotherapy sessions when I'd studied luxury authentication to pass the time. "Olivia?" Madison's perfectly shaped eyebrows shot up. "You're the consultant? Please sit." I gestured to the chairs I'd strategically placed facing the presentation screen. "We have a lot to discuss." I remained standing, remote in hand, and began the dissection. Blackstone Industries, founded 1985. Current market value approximately $50 million, though that's being generous. Debt of $75 million. 3 pending lawsuits. Stock down 60%. Click, new slide. Your expansion into retail was poorly researched and worse executed. The marketing department under Madison's leadership has lost $30 million in 3 years, with 0 measurable ROI. "Those campaigns were building brand awareness," Madison protested, her face flushing. "Brand awareness doesn't pay creditors," I replied, clicking to the next slide showing her department's expenses. $15,000 monthly entertainment budget, $8,000 monthly travel expenses, a $200,000 office renovation that included a meditation room and kombucha bar, all while the company was posting losses. My father shifted uncomfortably. "We've had some setbacks." "Setbacks?" I clicked to a new slide. "You've been paying yourself $2 million annually while the company burned through its reserves. You purchased a $3.2 million mansion in cash the same year you laid off 40 employees to cut costs. That's not a setback. That's mismanagement." "How dare you?" Madison started. "I dare because Sterling Capital has given me full authority to either save or sink your company. Every decision, every dollar of potential investment requires my signature." I let that sink in before clicking to the next slide, a familiar medical bill from 3 years ago. "Now, let's talk about family values." The room went silent. The bill showed clearly. $300,000 for cancer treatment. Beside it, I'd placed Madison's wedding budget, $400,000. 3 years ago, I needed $200,000 to save my life. You chose to spend double that on a single day of celebration. You told me Madison deserved her dream wedding while I was trying to deserve the right to live. I walked slowly around the table, my heels marking each step. Do you know how I survived? No one answered. I sold my consulting firm, the little business you always mocked, for $2.5 million to Sterling Capital. That sale saved my life and brought me here. The beautiful irony is that your dismissal of my worth led directly to me holding your fate in my hands. Olivia, sweetheart, my mother reached out. We're family, surely. Family? I laughed, but there was no warmth in it. Family doesn't choose flowers from Holland over chemotherapy. Family doesn't text, don't tell anyone about your cancer because it might overshadow my special day. I glanced at Madison. Oh yes, I kept that text, along with every other piece of evidence of how this family operates. I placed 3 contracts on the table. Here's Sterling Capital's offer. We'll inject $80 million to save the company, clear the debts, and provide working capital. But there are conditions. First, Dad and Madison resign from all executive positions immediately. You'll retain symbolic board seats with no voting power. Second, the company gets restructured under new management. My management. Third, your salaries are terminated, replaced with modest board stipends of $50,000 annually. You want to steal our company? Madison shrieked. No, I want to save it, which is more than you did for me. I pulled up another slide. Oh, and Madison, about your perfect marriage to Jason Whitmore, he hired me 6 months before your wedding to investigate some irregularities in his family's foundation. Imagine my surprise when I traced $300,000 directly to your personal accounts. Her face went white. You're lying. I have the forensic accounting reports. Jason has them too. He went through with the wedding to avoid embarrassment, but I heard he filed for divorce last month. Guess that $400,000 wedding was a poor investment after all. I moved to the final slide, a projection of Blackstone Industries' future. Without Sterling's intervention, you have 6 months before bankruptcy. The house, the cars, the jewelry, all of it will go to creditors. Or you can sign these contracts and at least retain something. This is blackmail, my father said weakly. No, this is business, the same kind of business that let you choose a wedding over my life. I set down the remote. You have until 5 p.m. to decide. My assistant Jenny will stay to answer any questions. I walked to the door, then paused. Oh, and Madison, that Birkin bag you're carrying, the authentication code inside should start with X, not Y. You paid $30,000 for a $500 fake. Maybe if you'd consulted your dying sister who spent chemotherapy hours studying luxury authentication, you could have avoided that mistake. I left them staring at the contracts, their perfect world crumbling around them. Through the glass walls, I watched my mother cry. The first genuine emotion I'd seen from her in years. Madison was frantically Googling Birkin authentication codes on her phone. My father just stared at the financial projections, finally seeing the disaster he'd created. At 4:47 p.m., Jenny knocked on my door. They signed, Ms. Blackstone. Ms. Chang, I corrected. I took my mother's maiden name after the wedding. Blackstone was never really my name anyway. The next morning, Sterling Capital announced the acquisition and restructuring of Blackstone Industries. The stock rose 15% on news of my appointment as CEO. The Wall Street Journal ran a feature story. The surgeon saves another patient. Olivia Chang's miraculous turnaround of Blackstone Industries. I implemented the restructuring immediately. The meditation room became a productive workspace. The $15,000 monthly entertainment budget was redirected to employee bonuses. The executive floor was converted to additional workspace, and I took a modest office on the 3rd floor. Within 6 months, the company was profitable again. My father now works as a part-time consultant for a small firm in New Jersey. His expertise still has value, just not at $2 million a year. My mother sold most of her jewelry to maintain their lifestyle after losing the executive salaries. They kept the house, barely, by taking in Madison as a tenant after her divorce was finalized. Madison works as a marketing coordinator at a startup, making $65,000 a year. She takes the train to work now, having sold her Mercedes to pay her divorce lawyer. The Birkin bag incident became industry gossip, destroying her carefully cultivated image as a luxury influencer. They don't speak to me anymore, which suits me fine. But every year on the anniversary of my diagnosis, I receive a delivery at my office. Flowers from Holland, the same varieties from Madison's wedding. The card always reads, "We're sorry. We know now what matters." I donate them to the cancer ward where I receive treatment. The nurses tell me the patients love them, these absurdly expensive flowers that brighten their darkest days. It seems fitting. Beauty from pain, hope from abandonment, strength from survival. Last week, Marcus Sterling promoted me to senior partner, the youngest in the firm's history. My compensation package now exceeds $3 million annually. I've saved 43 companies and thousands of jobs. The Wall Street Journal called me the most successful corporate restructuring specialist of her generation. But my greatest achievement hangs framed in my home office. Not a degree or an award, but that photo from the hospital, bald, weak, alone, but still fighting. Next to it hangs my latest scan. 5 years cancer-free. I survived without my family's help. I thrived despite their abandonment, and in the end, I saved them anyway. Not because they deserved it, but because I could. That's the difference between us. They had the means to save me and chose not to. I had every reason to let them fail and chose mercy instead. Though mercy, I've learned, can be its own form of justice when it comes with terms and conditions they have no choice but to accept.